Is your practice tired of wrestling with insurance denials, deciphering EOBs, and watching your revenue slip through the cracks? You are not alone. Welcome to The Claim Game, the podcast designed to cut through the confusion and provide you with the best practices for revenue cycle management success. We are Jeremy and Catherine Zug, and we've been with people just like you in the trenches. Each week, we'll break down complex billing processes, share real-world solutions from practices like yours, and ask questions of the game makers and changers of healthcare so you can take control of your revenue. Let's turn those claim denials into deposits and help you return to focusing on patient care. It's time to win the claim game.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Claim Game. I'm your host, Jeremy Zug, and I'm flying solo again. If you missed it on our last episode, Catherine and I welcomed our third child in September, and Catherine is taking some time off, understandably. And so I'll continue our journey across the revenue cycle management game board. This is the podcast that simplifies the complex landscape of RCM, giving you the real strategy and practical tips to help you win the claim game and get back to doing the clinical work you love and the reason for why you got into this in the first place. In this season, we've been breaking down the 6 core elements of RCM, or revenue cycle management. And for the last few episodes, we've been firmly planted in the eligibility and benefits territory. We want to think of eligibility and benefits like checking inventory or reading a rule book before embarking on a major journey or a new game or building that IKEA furniture that you so hate or love, I guess. I guess you would love it. You need to know what resources you have, what the rules are, and if you skip this step, you could be walking blind right into more denials, increased receivables, and just more administrative headache. And that's what we're here to try to avoid. Over the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to lay out a 2-step methodical strategy that can drastically cut down your denial rate and eliminate those costly, frustrating billing surprises. And we'll talk about what to collect, why you need a cheat sheet, and what questions to ask to ensure you'll get paid for the incredible work and value that you add. So let's jump right in. We'll roll the dice and get this territory covered. We're in the E&B territory, eligibility and benefits. We say E&B because it's shorter, and it's not that we don't love acronyms, but there are a lot of them in billing. This is the crucial third step in the revenue cycle management process, and I've heard this 100 times from providers. I just want to get paid, but the insurance company makes it impossible to figure out who to call. I hear you. I really do. And this is where the first best practice comes in, and we're going to call it organizing your payer contacts. You can't win a game without knowing where to look up the rules. So step 1 is all about creating your practice's ultimate game manual, right? A central living database of every piece of payer-specific information that you need right at your fingertips so that you can get the information you need. So what essential information should you be collecting and organizing for each payer? We're going to break this down into 3 categories. The first category is the contact information. You need the direct current phone numbers for provider relations, not the general patient line that will leave you on hold for an hour, and they won't talk to you anyway because that's for patients. You also need a note on the most efficient route to get E&B details, right? Does this payer have a solid provider portal? Those are oftentimes very helpful. We use them a lot, and sometimes they house the most accurate data. Is it better to call? Some insurance companies don't like innovation. I mean, they're companies like anybody else, and they don't want to have a portal, they don't want to build it, they don't have the budget, whatever, what have you. And so it's best to call some payers. Should you use a third-party tool like Availity, right? If you don't know what Availity is, it's a collection, a repository of information from healthcare payers, and it's very useful. Knowing the path is just as important as knowing the destination. Especially in this process, you can get lost pretty quick. The second category is the service list. This is a must-have. You need to list out all the CPT codes for the service your practice provides. Why? Because you'll use this list to verify if a patient's specific plan actually covers the specific service you're providing. So don't assume, especially if you offer niche services or specialized groups, that it's covered. It might not be. It might not be on your fee schedule, and you need to know. And by the way, the more CPT codes that you bill for, the more administratively complicated this process gets. So do your best to simplify. That's not oftentimes the case, but that's what we would recommend. And the third category is process ownership. You have to assign a process owner. This is a designated person responsible for keeping this information up to date. A common mistake is relying on outdated information or letting that knowledge live solely in one person's memory or brain. When that person leaves or takes a vacation, oftentimes this system crumbles, and the knowledge needs to be tied to a process, not the person. Keep that process, that workflow updated, and make sure it's stored in a central, easy to access location like your EHR or a secured shared drive. And you'll turn this chaotic, often time wasting search into an efficient, repeatable process. And that's really what we want for you. At Practice Solutions, we don't want you to have to hunt and peck and find the information that you need or resources or phone numbers. We want you to have a replicable billing system that scales with you or scales down with you, whatever you want to do with your organization. But these processes need to be repeatable.
One of the worst parts of my job, seeing practices lose revenue, not because of bad care, but because their notes didn't back it up. If you're billing insurance, you already know that your notes are your defense. So if your documentation falls short, clawbacks, appeals, and a whole lot of headaches feel inevitable. One of the best parts of my job, empowering our clients to focus on their practice, not payer back and forth. A big part of that has been discovering Blueprint, an AI assistant purpose-built for mental health care. In other words, made by therapists for the way therapists work. I've seen folks start using Blueprint to help with getting progress notes done faster, but it has turned into a game changer. Blueprint drafts compliant treatment plans, visit notes, and flags any missing clinical notes, which means fewer denials, cleaner claims, and faster revenue capture. Check the notes for the link to give Blueprint a try for free.
Now let's talk about the payoff. Why in the world would you do any of this? This process, eligibility and benefits, prevents a single frustrating mistake. And it's submitting a claim that was DOA, right? It was dead on arrival. That thing was never going to pay the moment you hit submit and it landed in the system at the insurance company. An eligibility and benefit check should never be skipped. It is foundational. It makes sure that you have the best information at your fingertips at the time that you call. It can prevent delays and denials and hopefully keep your revenue feeling stickier in your bank account. I will say, though, eligibility and benefit checks are not perfect. Whenever we do them at Practice Solutions, we're always told the same caveat, and that is that they are a quote of services, not a guarantee of payment. And that is true. Sometimes the insurance companies, they don't get it right the first time, they don't have the right information, etc. And so this is a process that you want to do to make sure you have the best fighting chance of getting paid for the services that you've rendered. But I would not necessarily hang your financial hat on this particular process. So that summarizes some of the rules of engagement there, and it tells you what you need to have in place. But now that we have those necessary tools and resources in place, we need to talk about the eligibility and benefit check itself. So we've built the manual, right, our resource for how to verify. And now we need to move to step 2, which is the actual eligibility and benefit check. This is the execution of the process, the real-time verification that happens before the patient walks in the door and hopefully before their first appointment with you. The primary goal here is twofold. First, to confirm that a patient is eligible for services with you, the specific provider. Second, and this is the most important part, to confirm that you will likely be paid for the service you provide. The benefit breakdown, the deductible, copay, coinsurance, out-of-pocket maximum, that's somewhat secondary. It's still important. But will you be paid for the service? That is the question you need to answer. So how do we execute this process, and what information do we absolutely have to gather? This process itself is a sequential checklist. First, we get the core data correct. We have to collect and confirm all the patient's information, their full name, date of birth, and their subscriber ID. Think about your intake process here. You need a script that ensures that you collect enough information on the phone to get started with the eligibility and benefit check. And then you use that information to confirm the data, right? Especially if you run into any issues getting a match right away. Second, use a consistent template. This is where your system, the process, really can shine in the life of your practice. Every eligibility and benefit check needs to be identical and thorough. And it's not about just an active status, yes, no. It's not a light switch. We need to consolidate the information onto a standardized template that forces you to check every required box. And so you might be asking, well, what's required of an eligibility check if it's not inactive active? Well, first we need to know eligibility, right? Is the coverage active and what was the effective date? 2, provider match. Does the policy cover the rendering provider's NPI? Third, CPT code check. Do they cover the specific CPT codes you plan to bill? Code or codes, right? Telehealth. Do they cover telehealth services and for how long? And do they need to have an in-person appointment every 6 months or so? And finally, prior authorization and referral. Are there any prior authorization requirements? Those are all information that you need to know that if you don't know, puts you at a substantial disadvantage to getting paid. And third, we need to gather the financial details. This is where you get the specifics you'll use to set financial expectations with your client. The deductible, the copay, coinsurance, and out-of-pocket max, and whether or not they have an individual and family plan. You also need to confirm if they have a primary and secondary insurance plan, which leads to coordination of benefits. Now let's talk about the consequences of not collecting this information. I know it sounds like a lot, but I promise that if you follow a similar repeatable process every time, you'll be able to get similar results. So consequences for not getting this information. So failing to get the information here, failing to get it right, can lead to 2 major denial types. 1, services not covered, either not covered because the CPT code is not listed on your fee schedule, or services not covered, this provider is not in network with this plan. Services not covered, we're actually not the payer, right? We have a subcontractor, a carve out, if you will, that covers those services, what have you. Services not covered can be a host of things. And it can be really frustrating to get that denial because they don't exactly tell you why. You have to find out, and then you have to go right back to the beginning of this process. So we don't want that for you. Second, denial, not medically necessary, both of which directly impact cash flow and create administrative follow-up headaches. When you're talking to the payer rep or using the portal, make sure you can describe your specialty and your service clearly. Hopefully you have your CPT code list, but if you don't articulate what you need clearly, the representative or the system you're giving you the most accurate information won't necessarily be possible. So be clear, be concise, be accurate, so that you can get the most accurate information back. And here's a tip I can't emphasize enough. You need to have some fighting power if a denial comes in incorrectly. So this means you get a date for when you got the eligibility check, a rep name if you called, and a reference number for every single eligibility and benefit check you complete. Those details really are your sword and shield, right? When you have to appeal a denial that contradicts what you were told, especially if an insurance company records all their calls. We've seen that a bunch of times with practices that we bill for. We do an eligibility check, or we do a string of eligibility checks for the same plan. We're told wrong information, and we're able to appeal denials based on that incorrect information. That is a defensive measure against revenue not coming into your bank account. And you need it, you want it, because it ensures that things are just solid. And you want to make sure that the billing engine is solid. Once you have all of this information consolidated on a template, what's the final step? You put it into an easy to view location within your electronic health record, and you use it to update the patient financial amounts both permanently and for all the upcoming appointments. The eligibility and benefit check is not helpful if it's not useful. So it must drive the patient's financial balance and claim submission. And finally, this isn't a one and done deal. It's a best practice to verify with the patient that their address and insurance plan are still current, and to check benefits at least annually when the plan renews. This process is a continual loop. And I'll give you one last cookie on the bottom shelf, if you will. One of the best things you could do is get a copy of the insurance card, front and back, On the back of the card will be a number to call for the right eligibility information for that plan, and get a copy of their driver's license. And make sure the name, date of birth, all the information you need to check benefits is correct. I can't tell you how many times, it's got to be in the thousands of times, where somebody has given us just in an email form eligibility and benefit information, and the patient spelled their name wrong or got their birthday wrong or the admin got it wrong. You need some objective sources of truth to be able to move through this process effectively. So however you need to structure that in the life of your practice, those are the things that you absolutely need to plant your flag on. So now I want to take us through case study, and we'll wrap up our episode here. But this all sounds really methodical. I know it sounds dry, or it can sound dry. It doesn't sound dry to a lot of folks, but it can sound really rote, I suppose. But I want to share a quick real world story to help illustrate how critical these two steps are. And this is a case study that we see. I'm going to give it to you, but we see the same thing repeated over and over. We worked with a group practice once with 5 therapists that called us because their denial rate had spiked to 25%. Now that's really, really high. And they were frustrated, overworked, and losing thousands of dollars a month. And what went wrong? So they turned to us, because this is often when practices turn to us, when denial rates spike, receivables are high, cash flow is going down, they have biller turnover, etc. This wasn't a complex coding error. Oftentimes providers in practice, they're overwhelmed with so many work tasks, and they assume that it's this big issue. And it was a simple step 1 failure, right? Their administrative assistant, the only one who knew which payer portal to use for each insurance, had quit suddenly. So there's turnover. That person walked out the door with a bunch of organizational knowledge. And the new hires were using a general phone number and the wrong online resource to get the information. And so they were getting vague or just purely inaccurate eligibility information. And they were missing key details for their major plans. And one of them was that a specific location-based modifier was required for all the claims in a certain area and for a certain service. And because they had no central up-to-date eligibility and benefit template or process, they were just throwing cash out the door and just not collecting it. So the fix that we helped implement with our done-for-you billing service was purely procedural, right? We implemented what I just got done articulating to you in this episode, and all of a sudden, $15,000 in revenue was appealed and collected. We were able to collect almost half of the denials in 60 days, and we also appealed the rest of the denied claims, and eventually those were collected. So the lesson here is that sometimes the biggest issues have the simplest fix, and we want to look as far upstream in your practice's administrative processes to find where the fix is. So let's wrap up our episode here, and we'll go on our merry way. But this is steps 1 and 2 of the eligibility and benefits territory. There are 3 key takeaways I want you to walk away with. First, build your game manual. Create an up-to-date, centralized insurance contact reference list with the quickest, most accurate way to verify benefits for every payer you work with. Don't let this crucial knowledge be tied to one person. 2, make the check mandatory. Execute a consistent, template-based E&B check for every new patient and annually for existing patients, or before every service. Your priority question is, will the service be covered? And 3, document, document, document. Always secure a date, a rep number, and a reference number for every verification call. That paper trail is your best defense against an unfair denial. Again, the goal of this process is to take some of the business burden off of your shoulders or off of your staff's shoulders, so you can stop wrestling with insurance companies and get back to the reason you became a clinician. You deserve to get paid for the excellent care you provide. If you're thinking, I need these tools now, don't worry about that. The insurance contact reference list and a eligibility and benefit check template we discussed today are available through our online learning hub, the Hourglass. Check out the link in the show notes to get those tools and start streamlining your process today. And hopefully you're able to recover some cash or increase your net receivables through a consolidated process. Next time on the Claim Game, we are going to level up completely. We'll be discussing a topic that causes major headaches, and that's prior authorization. This process is changing rapidly, and we'll break down not just how to manage them, but what's being done in the industry to try and fix them. You really won't want to miss that. And if you need a review of the game board, go back to episode 1 of the Claim Game, and you can listen to the overview of the game board. Thanks for all the good work that you're doing. We know that private practice can be challenging and complicated, but you're the reason why we're here. Thanks for joining me today on the Claim Game. Go out there and make sure that you can win the Claim Game. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode of The Claim Game, please take a moment to leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps new listeners to find us. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to The Claim Game on your favorite podcast app. Your feedback means so much to us. We want to provide valuable education about revenue cycle management. So if there's something we didn't cover in our topic that was a burning question for you, please let us know so we can try to get you the information you desire. You can find the links to all resources we mentioned in this episode in the show notes. And if you want to dive deeper into our resources, we have 2 places you can do that. First, you can go to our blog at practicesol.com/blog, where we have 8 years of educational blogs. If you want to learn more about what Practice Solutions does, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Just go to practicesol.com to learn more and to connect with one of our awesome people on our team. Thanks for listening. We are Jeremy and Catherine Zug, and this is The Claim Game. See you at the game table next time.